The wind whispered dry secrets through the trees of Makuzi, a village so thirsty that even the frogs had stopped singing. For 3 years the rains had passed overhead without touching the soil. The once busy stream behind the village now lay like a wrinkled scar in the earth, and children had forgotten the sound of water without a bucket's echo. Inside a cramped hut patched with woven mats and gilt, 15-year-old Seema stirred in her sleep. Her dreams were full of voices, her late mother's lullabies, the creaking call of water pots, and sometimes nothing at all. But on this night, the stillness was broken by a harsh voice and a sudden jolt. "Seema," hissed Noria, standing over her with a candle stub burning low. "Get up. Go to the river. We need water for tomorrow." Seema blinked into the darkness, heart racing. "Now." "But it's not yet dawn." "I said now." Noria tossed the cracked clay pot onto the mat with a thud that made Tano, Seema's younger brother, stir in the corner. He was feverish again, skin warm and lips dry, curled into himself like a shivering leaf. Seema sat up and reached for her wrap. The night air was sharp and her legs felt stiff. She tied the cloth tightly around her waist and picked up the pot, running her fingers along its worn rim. One more fall and it might split in two, but it was all they had. She didn't argue. Arguing brought nothing but more silence from Noria and another night without porridge. She stepped outside. The moon was gone. Not hidden, gone. Only stars scattered above like distant promises. The village slept under a sky too tired to shine. Her feet pressed into the dust path leading away from the huts, past the crooked fence where goats used to bleat, and toward the whispering edge of the distant river. Each step crunched softly. The pot rested on her hip, then on her head as she steadied it with one hand. Shadows stretched long and thin across the path. Fear walked beside her, quiet but loyal, just like the duty she carried. Behind her the door closed. Ahead the dark waited. But she walked forward. Seema left the last hut of Makuzi behind and stepped onto the wind-scoured track that ran to the river. Stars hung low, cold pinpoints bright enough to cast faint outlines of thorn bushes and cracked termite mounds. She placed the pot carefully on her head, fingers splayed around its rim, then lowered her hand. Balance came from the hips her mother had taught, not the arms. Her stride settled into a quiet rhythm, crunch of dust, whisper of fabric, hiss of breath. With every dozen paces the village lamps faded further, until darkness folded around her like another skin. She sat with the memory of Mama's voice drifting back, gentle as river mist. "Walk straight, my flower, the path will respect your courage." She remembered Mama's cough, the wet rattle that turned to silence the season the rains failed completely. Noria's voice had filled the hush that followed. It was not a cruel voice at first, only sharp like new metal. But grief curdled quickly. Noria began to scold Seema for spilled water that never spilled, for sweeping too slowly, for singing while pounding millet. When the drought grew worse and food dwindled, Noria's bitterness hardened into stone. She fed Tano porridge made thin as rainwater and kept the thick porridge for herself. She blamed Seema's softness for every cracked pot and every empty bowl. Tonight's errand was just another proof that the girl was useful only as legs and hands. Seema reached the old millet field. Once chest-high with green blades, it now lay bare, dirt sculpted into ripples by relentless wind. Thorns grasped at her ankles like skeletal hands. One pierced the arch of her foot. She hissed but did not stop. Ahead lay a cluster of fig trees, and beyond them the pale gleam of the riverbank sand. She thought of Tano curled under the raffia mat. His fever had risen that afternoon, his skin baked, eyes glazed. He had clutched her wrist and whispered, "Water, Seema. Cold water." She had lied and said there would be some by morning. The lie weighed more than the clay pot now pressing a perfect circle into her scalp. As she walked she mouthed the old tale the elders recited around dying fires. Long ago, when Makuzi was only a clearing in the forest, water watchers guarded the river. They were neither man nor beast, carved from moonlight and river clay, invisible by day yet bright as lanterns when midnight kissed the water. They tested any soul who dared draw water under starlight. The selfish returned with mud, the fearful with nothing, but the brave returned with water sweet enough to cure sorrow. Children loved the story, adults repeated it to keep wanderers home after dark. Seema had never seen a watcher, but tonight the tale rode her shadow, step for step. A breeze rose, lifting dust in silent spirals around her ankles. She tasted salt on her tongue, the sting of tears she had not noticed falling. The river was close now, she could smell its cool breath, a scent like wet stone. She shifted the pot slightly, feeling the hairline crack scuff against her scalp. If it broke, she would have to scoop water in her hands and hope Noria believed the story. If she failed, Tano would face morning with nothing. She whispered her mother's river song, the words cracked with disuse. Water remembers, water forgives, water returns. Each line matched her steps, anchoring her against fear. The stars above trembled as if listening. Behind her, Makuzi was a silhouette. Before her, the river waited, a dark ribbon etched in silver by the sky. She paused at the edge of the fig trees, pressing a hand to her chest where Mama's beaded necklace used to rest. Only skin met her palm now, but she imagined the beads anyway, warm from sunlight and love. She exhaled, steadying her resolve beneath silent stars. She breathed once, then stepped out of the trees and onto the open sand. The riverbank stretched silent and still. Water reflected the constellations so perfectly it looked like a second sky flipped upside down. She knelt carefully, lowering the pot beside her bare knees. The breeze died, leaving the world holding its breath at last. Seema reached forward, heart thudding, fingertips hovering over the black surface. A thin ripple broke the mirror, pointing downstream like a beckoning finger. She swallowed and leaned closer, searching for the courage her mother believed she carried. Behind her the thorn field rustled again, but she did not turn. The water watchers, if they existed, judged what lived in the heart, not the eyes. She dipped the pot's mouth into darkness and waited to see if the river would accept or deny the pleading of a girl tired of dust and blame. The water murmured in a language of breathless sighs, so quiet Seema first thought it might be only wind weaving through reeds. Then she realized the reeds were still, the air unstirred, and the whispering came from the river itself. It flowed slow, almost hesitant, a glossy ribbon the color of obsidian polished by night. Stars floated on its surface, blinking whenever ripples passed, as though the sky above and the sky below traded stories. Nothing else moved. No frogs croaked, no crickets sang. The silence felt deliberate, a held note in a song waiting for its next chord. Seema knelt, setting the cracked clay pot beside her. The sand was surprisingly cold beneath her knees, as if the river pulled heat from everything it touched. She leaned forward, cupped her hands and dipped them into the water. The sensation startled her. Frigid, silk-smooth and heavy, thicker than any water she had ever known. A shiver ran up her arms and shook loose a gasp she could not swallow. The whispering grew louder, forming phrases just beyond understanding. It reminded her of elders murmuring over riddles by firelight, half prayer, half warning. She lowered the pot, tilting it to let water slide inside. The pot bobbed once, resisted, as though something pressed upward from beneath. She steadied it, puzzled, and pushed gently again. This time the mouth found the surface, but the water pulsed against it, refusing entry. It was like trying to fill a vessel from living skin. Seema frowned, drew the pot back, and stared into the black mirror where her own face hovered pale and uncertain, stars studding her dark hair like shards of light. A subtle tremor rippled outward from where the pot had touched. Concentric rings raced away, bending starlight into wavering arcs. Something luminous flickered below, not reflection but substance, gray then silver then gone. Seema's breath caught. The tale of the water watchers slipped through her mind, the part children feared most. They could appear as fish or stone or even song, testing hearts for greed or truth. If you failed, the river marked you with unending thirst. She inhaled, telling herself it was only fish disturbed by her presence. She reached again, fingers gliding just under the surface this time, slower, gentler. The cold bit harder. She felt a pressure like unseen current coiling around her wrist. Then a shape brushed her palm, smooth, rounded, hard as polished bone. She jerked back. The object vanished with a swirl of silt, as if it had never been there. The whispering stopped so abruptly her ears rang in the hollow that followed. Seema's heartbeat thundered in her chest. She looked behind her. The thorn field was a dark, unmoving wall. No eyes gleamed in the bushes, no jackal crept at the edge of the sand. Only starlight watched. For a moment she wanted to rise, abandon the pot, and sprint back to Noria's hut, lie about bandits, anything to explain an empty vessel. But the image of Tano flashed before her, parched lips, fever-damp forehead, fragile fingers clutching her wrist. She could not return without water. She breathed once, twice, letting the river's cold settle like iron through her nerves. The hush deepened, but with her fears stilled, she noticed a different sound. A faint hum under the whispering like a drum struck from far beneath the ground. The pulse matched her heartbeat, steady, insistent. She whispered her mother's river song again, only the first line because the rest caught on sorrow, but even that tattered fragment seemed to soften the air. The hum brightened, almost luminous against her skin. Steeling herself, Seema slid the pot forward a third time. She did not force it. Instead she let its worn lip graze the surface until water lapped in, first stubborn, then freely, flowing with a hush like silk unrolling. A sigh escaped her, half relief, half wonder. When the pot was half full, she paused to test its weight. It felt heavier than she expected but strangely balanced, as if the water had settled into the vessel with purpose. She glanced at her hand, expecting perhaps to see frost, but only damp skin glistened in starlight. Whatever had brushed her was gone. Yet she sensed it lingered nearby, watching with patient eyes beneath the glossy black. She dipped her hand once more, hoping to reassure herself, but the river now felt ordinary, cold, yes, but no lurking presence, no whispered syllables. Only the hush of current passing reeds. Pot brimming, she rose slowly, legs trembling. She set the vessel on her head, steadying it with one palm, and took a step back. The sand held her weight. Nothing reached for her ankles, no whisper called her name. Still, she bowed toward the river, a gesture of respect born from fear and gratitude intertwined. The water gleamed for a heartbeat, a faint silver pulse cresting the ripples, like the river nodding in return. Then the surface stilled and became once more a black mirror reflecting an untouched sky. Seema turned toward the path home, the pot solid above her, heart fluttering but resolute. Whatever dwelled in that water had tested her, and she had not fled. Now she carried its gift and its mystery into the thirsty night. A gust brushed Seema's cheek as she shifted the pot onto a flat rock. The river's hush seemed to listen, waiting, so she closed her eyes and released the melody folded deep in memory. It was her mother's river song, the one Mama hummed while rinsing cassava leaves, the one that lingered on her lips the night fever took her. Seema had not sung it since. The first note emerged shaky, but the second carried strength, slipping across the water like a moth over oil. The words held no common meaning, they were older than the village, syllables sown from breath and tide. She sang them slowly, planting each sound like a seed in the current. On the final cadence she opened her eyes. The starlit surface quivered, and a faint blue glow gathered directly before her knees, as though light pooled in the river's palm. She caught her breath. A pulse rose from the depths, silvery and small at first, swelling as it neared the surface. Water swirled around it, a spiral of liquid glass. Then, with a soft, ringing clink, something the size of a mango detached from the whirl and bobbed on the ripples. A pearl, though no oyster had ever lived here. It glimmered with shifting colors, moon white, dawn gold, deep vine green. The surface reflected her face, smooth as polished river stone. Seema reached hesitantly. The pearl lifted toward her fingers before she touched it, as if the river exhaled it into her palm. The instant skin met shell, warmth spread through her arms, flooding her chest, seeping into bones made tired by drought and fear. She gasped, half expecting to drop the gift, but it settled in her grasp like it belonged there. The glow dimmed slightly as though satisfied to have found a keeper. A soft rushing sound drew her gaze to the pot resting on the rock. Though its mouth was a full handspan above the river, water arced upward in a thin ribbon, entering the vessel without a drop spilled. The cracked clay grew dark as it filled, first quarter, then half, then brimming, all in the span of her startled breath. When the last thread of water landed, the flow ceased as neatly as a cut string. The pot did not leak. The crack remained visible but seemed sealed from within by the liquid's quiet shine. She set the pearl against her heart and the river stilled. Not a reed fluttered, not a ripple marred the black mirror, even the whispering had faded into a profound hush as if fulfilled. Starlight brightened in the silence, winking across a waterway suddenly calm, content, complete. Instinct warned her this wonder must stay hidden. She loosened the woven sash at her waist, tucked the pearl beneath the cloth, and tightened the knot until stone pressed firm against skin. The warmth steadied her pulse. Lifting the now full pot to her head, she expected strain, yet the weight felt balanced, heavy yes but carried as if shared by invisible hands. She bowed once more to the river, voice too thick with awe for thanks. A shimmer crossed the surface not unlike a nod, a brief acknowledgement, and then all was as ordinary as midnight in drought. Only the full pot and the secret glow beneath her sash said otherwise. Seema turned away, stepping onto the sand. Her footsteps left sharper prints as if the ground respected them. The flavor of night had shifted, fear still lingered at the edges, but all walked beside it, holding its hand. Somewhere, perhaps, the water watchers watched still. But they had given her a gift, and gifts carried both promise and price. She adjusted the pot, took a breath scented with distant rain that had not yet fallen, and began the journey home. The walk back to Makuzi felt different, as if the ground itself had softened for her steps. The full pot on Seema's head should have pressed down like a second skull, but it rode light as if buoyed by invisible wind. Her feet moved faster than she intended, swift, sure, and silent. Muscles that usually burned with each step now moved like flowing rope, steady and tireless. Even her breath came easy, without the rasp that often caught in her throat from the dry air. She paused once to lift the pot and check that the water hadn't leaked or somehow vanished. It was still full, glistening as though the stars themselves had melted inside. The thorn bushes along the path, once her enemies, bent slightly to the sides as she approached, their spines brushing against her calves but never pricking. She didn't question it, not yet. Perhaps her fear had faded, or maybe the pearl's warmth still spread through her. Tucked under her sash, it pulsed faintly against her hip like a heartbeat that didn't belong to her, slow and calm and knowing. By the time the first huts of the village reappeared, dim shapes against the horizon, Seema's steps had barely slowed. The wind shifted as she passed the millet field, and she caught a scent she hadn't known for months, moist earth, soft as after a gentle rain. But when she looked to the sky, it was still dry, stars sharp and distant. She reached the door just before dawn broke. The rooster hadn't crowed. That gave her time. She slipped inside, setting the pot in the corner gently. The gourd ladle sat beside the coals. She poured a half scoop into the old calabash bowl, then crept toward the mat where Tano lay curled, wheezing faintly, sweat slicking his brow. She dipped a cloth and wiped his face. The fevered twitch at the corner of his mouth calmed. Then she tilted the bowl to his lips. His cracked tongue flicked against the rim before he drank. One sip, then two, then he reached for it with both hands and drank again. He fell back on the mat, breathing slower. Seema knelt beside him, heart full and cautious. A moment passed. Then another. His chest rose and fell more evenly now. He didn't cough. He didn't even moan in his sleep. Seema sat back on her heels, bowl still in hand, watching him like she expected the fever to rise again and call her a liar. But it didn't. For the first time in weeks, his sleep looked like rest, not struggle. She sipped from the same bowl. The water tasted like air after rain, like leaves from the tallest tree, like silence in a forest. Cool and smooth, with no trace of the river's usual grit. It slipped down her throat and filled her belly with something close to peace. She exhaled through her nose, feeling each breath stretch wider than before. But the questions rushed in soon after. What had she found? Who had given it? And why her? She turned slightly, unfastening her sash. The pearl still sat against her skin, warm and silent. It hadn't changed shape or color. It gave off no heat but seemed to carry its own pulse, like it was breathing alongside her. Was it alive? Was it watching? Was it a gift, or a trick? Her mother had once said that spirits never gave anything for free. Even blessings wore masks. She remembered Mama's voice whispering, "When something impossible touches your life, ask not only what it brings, but what it might take away." Seema looked back at Tano. Still resting. Still breathing evenly. She leaned closer and brushed his hair away from his damp forehead. Would she trade her comfort to keep that peace in his chest? Yes. Without hesitation. But would the river ask for more than that? She stared at the pot in the corner. No leaks. No cracks. Water still glistened at the rim, calm and inviting. She resisted the urge to pour it all out to test the magic further. Was it only healing water when it came from her hand? What if someone else drank it? Would Noria know the difference? Her stomach tightened. Noria. She'd wake soon and she'd expect a story, maybe even an excuse. The idea of lying sat poorly in Seema's chest, but so did the idea of telling truth to someone who might twist it. What would Noria do if she learned about the pearl? Trade it? Worship it? Break it just to prove she could? Seema wrapped the sash tighter. The pearl stayed hidden, silent. Whatever its purpose, it had chosen her. For now she would keep it that way. She lay beside Tano, listening to his gentle breathing and the distant cry of the rooster as dawn cracked open across Makuzi. The shadows from the river had followed her home. But so had something more. And whether it was a blessing or a burden, she would carry it. Noria woke before sunrise, restless and irritable, the way she always did when her own throat felt dry. When she entered the main room she stopped short. The cracked clay pot leaned in its corner, filled almost to the lip. Even in low light the water gleamed with a clarity she had not seen in months. No yellow tinge, no drifting grit. She scooped a handful and sipped. It was cool, clean and strangely sweet, like water poured straight from cloud to palm. Shock flickered across her face, replaced instantly by suspicion. She turned toward the children's mat. Seema knelt beside her brother, wiping his brow with a damp cloth. Tano's skin, which had burned all night, now felt only warm. His cheeks held a faint flush instead of fever's dull gray. He slept peacefully, breathing through his nose without a rasp. Noria narrowed her eyes. "Where did you find water like this?" Her tone was hard enough to chip rock. Seema kept her gaze on Tano. "At the river, stepmother." "The river? That river is mud and sickness. Everyone says so." Noria stalked to the pot, dipping the gourd again and letting the liquid dribble through her fingers. "You did something. You tampered with charms or begged some spirit. Did you meet a traveling herbalist? Speak." She slammed the gourd on the floor. Seema rose slowly. The warmth of the hidden pearl pulsed beneath her sash, steady but urgent, as though warning her to tread carefully. She steadied her voice. "I prayed, that is all. I sang mother's song to the water." Noria's mouth twisted. "Songs do not pull clean water from filth. They can if spirits listen," Seema answered, hating the half-lie but clinging to it like a vine in flood water. Noria studied her. Seema's eyes were bright despite the sleepless night, her skin not drawn or dusty. A faint scent of rain-laden wind clung to her clothes. Something had changed. Noria took a slow breath, counting the possibilities. A girl who could summon clean water in drought was either cursed or gifted, but both conditions could be traded, if handled right. She softened her voice, a tone she reserved for bargaining with traders. "Show me the place where you prayed, Seema. We can both ask for more blessing. Think what we could earn at market if we sold a little. We would never go hungry." Seema shook her head. "The spirits chose a single moment. I don't know if they will choose again. Then you will take me tonight." Noria's sweetness cracked like thin ice. "Or I will tell the chief's guards you consort with witchcraft. They will bind you until you confess." Fear pricked under Seema's ribs, but she kept her face still. "I will try," she said, "but the river listens only to certain hearts." She hoped the words sounded mystical enough to slow Noria. The stepmother harumphed and stomped outside, calling over her shoulder that she would fetch millet from the store hut. Seema exhaled shakily. She knelt by Tano again, brushing hair from his brow. The boy blinked awake, eyes clearer than she'd seen in weeks. "Water," he whispered. She lifted the gourd, letting him sip. Each swallow sounded like relief. Outside, Noria hoisted a small sack, but instead of heading toward the communal mortar she turned down the lane toward Widow Salima's doorstep. Salima was the most eager gossip in Makuzi, and Noria knew no rumor traveled faster than one whispered into her ear. She greeted the widow loudly, ensuring any early risers might hear. "My stepdaughter came home with strange water," she declared. "It cured fever in an hour. Mark me, something unnatural is stirring." Salima's eyes widened, already savoring the taste of fear she would sprinkle across doorways. "Will you bring it to the chief?" she asked. "I intend to," Noria replied. "But first I must see the source." She leaned closer, dropping her voice to a faux confidential growl. "Spirits do not choose children without reason. Perhaps the girl stole a charm. Perhaps she struck a bargain." She straightened, smoothing her wrapper. "If I uncover treasure, there will be plenty for those who help me keep quiet." Salima nodded, pretending solemnity while her mind raced with calculations. Food, cloth, maybe silver if the chief paid well for sacred water. All morning, small knots of people approached Seema's doorway. They shuffled shyly, carrying gourds and bowls, driven by the whisper that pure water had flowed here. Noria shooed them away, promising she would share once she knew it was safe. Her smile carried the softness of a goat eyeing tender shoots. Inside, Seema counted each knock with dread. The pearl at her waist thrummed stronger each time fear slid under her skin, as though urging her to trust its guidance. She ladled sparingly for Tano and herself, refusing her own thirst so the pot might last. Oddly, it never dipped below half. She tried not to examine the miracle too closely, fearing she might break its fragile balance. While Noria chatted with Salima again, Seema slipped into the backyard and dug a small hollow beneath a clump of lemongrass. She buried the pearl there, wrapping it first in a strip of cloth so it wouldn't gleam through the soil. She patted earth over it, whispered a promise to return, and smoothed the ground with her palm. By late afternoon Noria returned, eyes bright with calculated kindness. She handed Seema a slice of roasted yam, richer than anything offered in weeks. "Eat, my girl. You did well." Seema accepted but tasted only suspicion. Noria watched each bite as if measuring the space it left on Seema's plate. When twilight bled across the sky, Noria announced they would go to the river together after moonrise, so the water watchers can see us both. Seema nodded, hiding her trembling hands in her skirt folds. Night settled. Noria feigned sleep but remained half awake, listening for Seema to rise. Seema lay motionless beside Tano, heart drumming. Beneath the lemongrass the pearl pulsed like a buried star, awaiting its next choice. And Noria, eyes glinting in darkness, rehearsed the path and the lies she would tell once the glowing treasure was hers alone. By the next morning, the whispers had grown legs and wandered far beyond Seema's compound. At the edge of the millet field, two old women stooped over dry roots talked in hushed awe. At the grinding stone, three young mothers stirred porridge while glancing toward Seema's hut. Even the boys who usually taunted her on their way to fetch firewood walked past silently, heads tilted with curiosity and maybe, just maybe, respect. It was said that Tano had not only stopped coughing, but that he stood and asked for yam. That the water had been clear, cold, and sweet. That even a stubborn goat near their yard had drunk from a puddle by the step and begun walking without a limp. One woman swore her cassava, planted months ago and long since dead, had sprouted a green shoot after she tipped her leftover dishwater near the house, unaware it contained drops from Seema's pot. Seema moved through the village quietly, doing chores with her head bowed, trying to ignore the looks. But the weight in her sash was a constant reminder, gentle, pulsing, and warm like a quiet voice pressed against her side. She had unearthed the pearl again before sunrise, sensing she might need it near her. It wasn't until the sun dipped low and the shadows lengthened that Mama Kolo appeared. The healer always walked with a staff of carved bone and wore bracelets that clicked like rainfall. She spoke little and listened much. Her eyes, milky with age but sharp beneath the cloudiness, seemed to cut through pretense like a blade. Seema was helping a neighbor sweep when she saw the old woman approaching. Mama Kolo nodded once to the neighbor, who backed away slowly, eyes wide. "Seema," the old woman said. Her voice was low, like stones rubbing together. "Walk with me." Seema obeyed, legs trembling slightly as they passed beneath the acacia trees behind the village. Mama Kolo said nothing as they climbed the slope to the edge of the dry well, now more of a hollow in the earth where children once played. There, with no one to hear, she turned. "I dreamed of stars falling into water," Mama Kolo said, "and of a girl with dust on her feet who walked like she carried the moon." Seema stayed silent. "You brought water home when no one else could. And now it tastes of rain and root. That's not the work of a child. That's the work of the deep." Still Seema didn't speak. Her hand moved to her sash. "Show me," Mama Kolo said, not as a command but as an invitation. With fingers that shook slightly, Seema reached into the fold and unwrapped the strip of cloth. The pearl lay nestled within, dull now in the shadow but still unmistakably strange. Its surface shimmered with color that seemed to move inside it, like a cloudy sky held in glass. Mama Kolo inhaled sharply. Her hand hovered over the pearl, not touching. Her eyes went wide and her staff trembled. "Child," she whispered, "do you know what this is?" Seema shook her head. The healer knelt, slow and reverent. "It is a river heart," she said, "given once in 100 years. And only ever to the soul carrying the heaviest burden. It is not a reward, it is a responsibility." Seema blinked. "But, why me?" Mama Kolo's gaze softened. "You walk alone when others sleep. You give your food before you eat. You carry silence when others shout. The river saw that. And it gave you its own heart." Seema looked down at the pearl, now warm again in her palm. "What does it want from me?" Mama Kolo sighed. "River hearts test the vessel who holds them. They magnify the truth within. If you are selfish, it will become poison. If you are kind, it becomes healing. If you fear, it becomes chaos. The river watches always." Seema's throat tightened. "Noria, she wants it. She already suspects." "Then you must protect it not just from her, but from those who would worship or fear it," Mama Kolo said. "You must not tell the council. Not yet. Let the river guide you. Share what you must. But hide what must be hidden." Seema looked toward the village, where the rooftops shimmered gold in the evening sun. She could already feel the weight of everyone's hopes, like they were water jugs balanced across her shoulders. "What do I do now?" she asked softly. "You do what you have already done," Mama Kolo said, standing. "Walk carefully. Speak truth. And carry water to those who need it." The old woman turned to go, then paused. "When the time comes, the pearl will test you. Be ready." And with that, she disappeared down the path, bracelets whispering like wind through dry grass. Seema stood alone by the old well, clutching the river heart. The breeze stirred gently. Somewhere, a bird called out once, then went silent. The pearl pulsed again, slower now, calmer. She tucked it back into her sash and looked to the sky, where clouds had begun to gather, not heavy storm clouds but thin, streaked wisps that hadn't been there earlier. They glowed faintly in the fading light. For the first time she allowed herself to wonder what else the river had planned. Because one thing was clear now, this was no ordinary gift. And the next test was already on its way. Night in Makuzi carried heat like fever, but Noria's skin felt cold as she slipped from her mat. She had listened all evening to Seema breathing near the hearth, waiting for the girl's breath to deepen into the soft cadence of true sleep. The moon hid behind ragged clouds, leaving the compound drowned in darkness, perfect for quiet deeds. Noria crept to the doorway, her anklets wrapped in cloth so they made no sound. Outside, the lemongrass swayed, whispering with each rise of wind. She moved to the clump where she had once seen Seema linger and kneel. It took only moments to find disturbed soil, still soft beneath her fingertips. She dug with frantic care until her nails struck cloth. Unwrapping the bundle, she felt warmth pulse through her palms as the pearl emerged, dull yet undeniably alive. An involuntary gasp escaped her. She clutched the river heart, hid it beneath her wrapper, and padded through the sleeping village toward the chief's large hut, where 2 guards dozed against a wall. The guards awoke at her hissed promise of wealth beyond imagination. She pushed past them, her voice a mixture of humility and haste. Chief Ajani sat by a smoky lantern, greed already sharpening his eyes before she finished speaking. Noria laid the pearl in his broad palm. It pulsed once and his grin widened. He ordered his guards to escort Noria home and keep their mouths sealed. What happened next would be for his council, and the traders beyond the ridge, to marvel at. Behind her hurried steps, Noria heard the chief laughing low, a laugh like the clang of copper coins in an empty jar. Far from the compound, Seema's sleep turned restless. She dreamed of rain clouds spiraling into a single glowing eye deep beneath the river. Whispered chants, neither language nor music, filled her skull. Return, return. She jolted awake in darkness, heart pounding. Something was wrong, her sash felt strangely light. She scrambled outside, only to find the soil under the lemongrass freshly torn. Panic rose like smoke in her throat. Before she could shout, a low roar echoed from the distant riverbed. The earth trembled beneath her bare feet. The river that had been a thin black ribbon hours ago now thundered, swollen and frantic. Moonlight flashed on waves where no waves had ever risen. Water vaulted the banks, bulldozing thorn shrubs and broken field fences. Seema stared, horrified, as a column of water burst through the sparse millet field, rolling toward huts like an uncoiled serpent. The first shouts shattered the night, fathers calling children, mothers dragging pots and goats onto roofs. A rush of muddy foam swept through the goat pen next to Seema's yard, toppling posts like toy sticks. The cracked clay pot, source of so many rumors, lay knocked aside, spilling its miraculous contents into the rushing tide. Elder Benga appeared in the sputtering torchlight, staff sinking into soggy earth with each step. Punishment, he croaked above the din, the water watchers are angry. Someone has stolen their heart. Mama Kolo, arriving breathless, only nodded grimly. Her bracelets jangled with every tremor of the ground. She looked straight at Seema as if understanding bloomed between them without words. Seema whispered one name, Noria, and the healer's mouth flattened to a tight line. Across the square, the chief's hut glowed brighter than the others. Lanterns blazed, guards scrambled to move his treasures to higher shelves. Seema watched him stride outside holding the pearl high, showing it to villagers even as water surged at his ankles. He shouted that the river's fury was merely proof of the heart's power, that once sacrifices were made, it would calm and bring wealth. But the pearl's dull surface flickered, and every flicker coincided with another violent surge. As he spoke, the mud beneath his feet liquefied, sucking at his sandals, sending a shiver through gathered onlookers. Seema pushed through the crowd, water slapping her calves, Tano clinging to her skirt. She shouted for the chief to give back what did not belong to him. He scoffed and lifted the pearl higher, only to crumple a moment later when an invisible force punched the breath from his lungs. The pearl rolled into the flood, bobbing like a captive moon, drifting toward Seema. She waded forward, arm outstretched, but a wave slapped it beyond reach. Tano cried out as the current tugged at his legs. Mama Kolo grabbed the boy, hauling him to a half-drowned mortar stone. The elders assembled as best they could beneath the baobab trunk now half submerged in frothing water. Their voices rose together, invoking ancient plea, "O water watchers, release us, take back what is yours, spare the innocent." Lightning forked silently inside the cloudless sky, illuminating the pearl swirling in eddies near Seema. She lunged again, fingers brushing its shell. Instantly she felt heat, as though the stone scolded her for allowing its theft. She clutched it to her chest, and the river's roar dulled only slightly but enough to feel the change. That night, once the flood settled into powerful currents still above normal banks, the villagers climbed onto verandas and roofs. Fires sputtered. Crops lay flattened beneath silt. Goats bleated, roosters drowned in their baskets. Yet amid the ruin, Seema collapsed on a roof beam beside sleeping Tano, pearl still pulsing against her skin. Exhaustion dragged her into troubled dreams. She stood on a riverbank made of glass. Figures formed from mist, long arms like reeds, faces blurred by moving water. They circled her silently, then one stepped forward, hand out, palm open. The voice that filled her mind was tidal, impossible to measure in volume or tone. You carry our heart, but your people broke covenant. Return it or the river will not rest. She tried to speak, but her mouth filled with cold water. The spirits parted, showing a vision of huts gone, fields drowned, only the baobab's crown visible above an endless lake. Her chest burned with desperation. She nodded, clutching the pearl. The mist figure's hand closed gently over hers, and the dream shattered like clay against stone. Seema woke before dawn. The village sat weary in gray light, water still swirling through footpaths but lower now. Chief Ajani lay on a mat, coughing river mud, eyes wild. Noria knelt nearby, trembling, her ambition wilted. Seema rose, the pearl cool but vibrant in her grasp. She understood the bargain. Sunrise must find the river heart back in its cradle, or Makuzi would drown beneath the weight of greed. Morning broke over Makuzi in streaks of red and gold, but the light did little to soothe the wreckage below. Pools of brown water shimmered across fields, and debris lay tangled where fences and gardens once stood. Villagers moved like ghosts, murmuring, sweeping, salvaging. And above it all stood the ancient baobab tree, its broad trunk still firm despite the flood, its gnarled limbs like fingers pointing to the gods. It was beneath this sacred tree that the elders called a gathering. Mats were rolled out on the high ground still dry, and the carved staff of justice, wrapped in leather and cowrie shells, was placed in the center of the circle. The village had not seen a judgment this serious in years. Women with babies on their backs stood in clusters. Children sat on stones, wide-eyed and quiet. Even the most stubborn men came without protest. For they had all seen the river rise. And they had all heard the stories of the girl and the pearl. Chief Ajani sat hunched, coughing weakly beside his guards. His fine robes were torn and stained with mud. His usual voice, booming with pride, was now raspy and low. Noria sat beside him on a stool, her eyes flicking nervously between Seema and the elders. Her face was drawn, her hands clasped too tightly in her lap. Seema stood alone. She wore no special robes. Her wrapper was simple, wet at the hem, and her hair still held dried bits of grass from the rooftop where she'd slept. But around her waist, hidden beneath her sash, the pearl pulsed with a steady heat, alive, alert, waiting. Elder Benga rose first. He leaned on his staff and looked out over the village. The flood was no accident, he said. The water rose in anger. The water watchers gave a warning and someone broke trust. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Let the one who holds the river heart speak, said Mama Kolo. Her voice, though soft, stilled the whispers. Let her tell what happened. Seema stepped forward. Her throat felt dry but her voice was steady. The river gave me a gift, a pearl, she said. It filled my pot. It healed my brother. I kept it hidden because I feared what greed would do. She turned to Noria, who shifted uncomfortably. But it was stolen, Seema continued. Last night. My stepmother dug it from its hiding place and gave it to the chief. A gasp spread through the crowd. Noria opened her mouth to protest, but Mama Kolo raised a hand. Let her finish. Seema reached beneath her sash and drew out the pearl. In the sunlight, it glowed faintly, like a lamp lit from within. The villagers leaned closer. The elders squinted. Even Chief Ajani stared, mouth parted in awe. Then the pearl began to hum. A soft, trembling sound, like wind over water, like faraway song. As Seema held it high, the glow deepened and a sudden light flared upward. It didn't blind but revealed. A shimmer spread into the air like a ripple across water. And in the ripple the visions came. The crowd gasped as they saw Noria in darkness, hands scrabbling in dirt. The pearl rising in her palm. Her hunched figure at the chief's doorstep. His greedy smile. The guards exchanging glances. The pearl changing hands. The visions moved like smoke, fading slowly, leaving stunned silence behind. Seema lowered the pearl. Noria shot to her feet. Lies. Trickery. She has cursed it. It deceives you all. But even as she shouted, the earth beneath her quivered slightly, and water bubbled up through the cracks between the stones. The message was clear. Chief Ajani lowered his head and said nothing. Elder Benga stepped forward. Do you deny what we've seen? Noria's jaw worked soundlessly. Her knees gave way and she sank back onto her stool, lips trembling. Elder Malika stood. There is no need for more argument. The river heart chose the girl. The river itself has spoken. Elder Dalu, youngest of the council, nodded. We declare Seema the rightful bearer of the river heart. A wave of quiet awe passed through the crowd. Mama Kolo stepped to Seema's side. You are its keeper now, child. Use it with wisdom. Seema felt the weight of the title settle on her shoulders. Keeper. Not just a girl, not just a water fetcher. She looked out across the faces, some amazed, some uncertain, all watching. The same people who once called her nothing more than an orphan under a bitter woman's thumb. I don't want praise, she said, her voice clear. I only want peace, for our village and for the river. The elders nodded. Seema stepped back, the pearl still glowing softly in her palm. The judgment had ended. But the story of the river heart had only just begun. Seema walked beside Noria along the damp path, the dawn mist hovering low over the broken millet. The elders had ordered the river heart returned before noon, but the order alone could not force obedience. So Seema kept the glowing pearl cradled in both hands while Noria followed 2 steps behind, wrists unbound, head bowed under the weight of ruined ambitions. A few villagers trailed at a distance, silent witnesses to whatever the river might decree. The air smelled of silt and uprooted reeds. When the shoreline came into view, the river was swollen, mud-brown and restless, its surface cut with fast spirals that hissed like anger. Seema's sandals squelched. She stopped at the water's edge where yesterday the bank had been dry sand. Now waves licked her ankles. The pearl pulsed warmly, urging movement, but she turned to Noria first. You must stand with me, she said. Noria lifted her gaze, eyes red from a night without sleep. I tried only to give us riches, she whispered, exhaustion stripping the malice from her voice. The river answered with a crack of current against driftwood, as if mocking the excuse. Seema reached for her stepmother's hand. Noria hesitated, then gripped it, fingers cold. Together they waded knee-deep. A sudden undertow seized Noria's legs and yanked her forward. She screamed once before water closed over her head. Seema lunged, dropping the pearl into the crook of her elbow and plunged beneath the surface. The flood tasted of iron and clay, it churned around her like a beast. She caught a fistful of Noria's wrapper, kicked hard and forced them upward. They broke into air, coughing. Noria's eyes were wild with terror. She clung to Seema, dragging them both under again. Seema tore free, wrapped an arm around Noria's chest from behind, and kicked for shore with every bit of strength the pearl had lent her. Her feet struck mud, then sand. She hauled Noria onto a log. The current hissed past, disappointed. Noria collapsed, sputtering but alive. Seema pressed her palm to her stepmother's back until the coughing eased. Then she turned to the pearl. It glowed brighter, as though satisfied with her choice. She waded out once more, alone this time, water rising to her waist. Holding the pearl above the surface, she spoke without knowing whether the river understood words. I return what is yours. Teach us to honor you. She lowered the pearl. The moment it touched the water, light flared downward like a torch hurled into a well. The roar of the flood quieted. Waves shrank, swirling mud settled, revealing ribbons of current beneath. A stillness spread, not empty but expectant, as though every drop listened. A ring of bubbles drifted where the pearl sank, then closed like healing skin. Ripples widened from the place where the pearl had vanished, and from those ripples burst a flash of silver bodies, tilapia, catfish, barbel, leaping in arcs of joy. They splashed around Seema's hips, slipped past her legs, and raced toward the shallows where villagers waited in astonishment. Men waded in with baskets. Children shrieked as fish practically jumped into their arms. Women laid skirts on the sand, and the fish flopped onto the makeshift nets as if volunteering for supper. Birds swooped down, skimming the waves as if blessing the truce. Within minutes, dozens lay shimmering on the bank, enough to feed every home for days. The river's surface smoothed to glass. Sunlight poured through a gap in the clouds, touching the water with gold, and in that reflection Seema thought she saw figures of mist bowing low before dissolving into spray. She returned to Noria, who sat trembling on the log watching villagers cheer. Tears cut clean tracks down her muddy cheeks. I should have drowned, she said, voice ragged. Water spares who learns, Seema answered. She offered a hand. After a pause Noria took it, pressing her forehead to Seema's knuckles in silent apology. They walked back toward the village together, past laughing children and grateful elders. Behind them the river flowed peacefully, its wrath spent, its gift delivered, carrying on beneath the same sky but forever changed by a girl who had chosen mercy over fear. The first rains after the flood came early, pouring over Makuzi in soft sheets that smelled of warm stone and waking seeds. The river remained calm, cradling its memories beneath a smooth surface, but one morning a new sound joined the chorus of dripping leaves. A trickle, hushed yet insistent, just beyond Seema's doorway. She stepped outside and found water bubbling through cracked earth near the lemongrass, clear as glass and cold as moonlight. It ran in a thin ribbon across the yard, carving a path toward the ever-thirsty millet field before disappearing into sand. She knelt and cupped her hands beneath the stream. The water held a faint glow, the same shifting light that once lived inside the river heart. She tasted it and felt a wave of calm move through her, as though the spring itself whispered, "I remember you." When villagers gathered, breath caught in their throats at the sight of water rising from ground that had been parched for seasons. Mama Kolo touched the flow with reverent fingers and declared that the pearl had dissolved into the earth, leaving its spirit behind. The elders needed no debate. They named the gift Daughter's Well in honor of the girl who had carried the river's heart home. Within days, children fetched water with laughter instead of dread, and women no longer sat in long dawn queues at the far bank. The spring never faltered, no matter how many gourds dipped or how many rains skipped. Seema built a low wall of stones around it, mortaring the gaps with clay to protect the source from trampling feet. She planted basil and mint along the rim, their roots drinking, their leaves offering medicine to anyone with cough or sore tongue. Birds nested in the acacia above, and in the hottest hours a gentle mist drifted from the pool, cooling the yard. Noria watched these changes with wary eyes at first. The day Makuzi named the well, she stayed at the edge of the crowd, hands clasped, listening to praises meant for a daughter she had once belittled. Shame weighed heavier than drought, and for a while she avoided the new water, choosing instead to haul muddy buckets from the river as if penance required suffering. But Tano followed his sister to the spring each dawn, sometimes hobbling, sometimes running, depending on how the night cough treated him. Noria saw him grow stronger. She saw him joke with other children, splashing them with water that smelled of morning. It was impossible not to notice that the spring carried more than liquid. It carried forgiveness. One evening, Seema returned from teaching the younger girls how to balance full pots on graceful spines and found Noria sitting by the well, knees tucked under her chin. A shallow bowl floated on the water, catching the pond's reflected stars. Noria didn't look up immediately, but when she did, her eyes were gentle. "It doesn't run dry," she whispered. "No matter how many times I fill this bowl. It remembers what we need," Seema replied, seating herself beside her stepmother. Noria reached for Seema's hand. "I can't change what I did," she said, voice splintered with regret. "But I can learn. If you'll let me." Seema squeezed her fingers. "The river forgave because we chose mercy. I can forgive too." From that evening, Noria rose before sunrise to sweep the path around the well and carry buckets for older neighbors whose backs had bent with age. She took lessons from Mama Kolo, learning to mash herbs and wrap broken wrists with banana bark. Sometimes she'd pause and watch Seema show children how to kneel in respect before drawing water, reciting the short prayer Mama used to sing. Water remembers, water forgives, water returns. And often she joined, her voice unsteady but growing steadier, until the prayer filled the courtyard like gentle rain. The seasons turned. The rebuilt millet fields shimmered green under the mid-year sun. Fishermen still cast nets in the river, but they also set traps in fresh canals cut from the spring, where silver tilapia spawned in abundance. Seema organized groups of youths to plant more trees along the bank, explaining how roots drank floodwaters and soothed the river's temper. She spoke not from authority but from experience, and people listened because the well at her doorstep offered proof beyond words. One dusk, as orange bled into violet, Seema carried a clay jug to the spring for her family's supper. Tano raced ahead, leaping over stones, laughing as the jug rocked on her head. Noria followed at a slower pace, arms full of greens to stew. Seema knelt at the well's edge, dipping the jug into crystalline water that rippled pale gold in the twilight. A hush settled over the yard, the kind of hush that arrives when the world prepares to speak. Across the surface, shapes appeared, translucent figures woven from mist and moonlight. They were tall, their limbs slender like reeds, their eyes deep shadows. They bowed in unison, water swirling at their invisible ankles. Seema held her breath, recognizing the water watchers not with fear but with a quiet awe. In their motion she sensed gratitude, not demand. Returning the bow, she murmured the river song, letting it drift across the well like a blessing. The figures straightened, their outlines shimmering, then dissolved into spiraling wisps that melded with rising mist. The water stilled, darkening to its usual calm. Noria, who had witnessed everything, sank to her knees, eyes shining. Tano clapped once, softly, as though he feared to break the spell. Seema lifted the filled jug, resting it on her head. She glanced at the sky where the first stars glowed through thinning clouds. Water remembers, water forgives, water returns. She smiled, stepping onto the path. Behind her the spring whispered over its stones, carrying memory forward, ready to tell its story to every hand that approached with hope and respect.